Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Welcome to Life Report. I am your host, Josh Brom, and we're here with Gabby Veers and our special guest, Megan Almon, presenter with Life Training Institute. Thanks for joining us, Megan.
Happy to be here.
Let me introduce Megan. She's graduated from the University of Georgia with a journalism degree, and then she got her master's in Christian apologetics from Biola University. She and her husband Tripp are raising two kids in Noonan, Georgia, and you can learn more about Megan, or you can read her contributions to the LTI blog by going to prolifetraining.com. Today we're talking about the Planned Parenthood video that if you're super into the goings-on in the pro-life world, then you probably know that Planned Parenthood released this this commercial, or just video on YouTube that seems to be kind of trying to redefine the abortion debate and to try to get away from the labels pro-life and pro-choice. Other pro-life bloggers have talked about this. I feel like we've got some things to say that haven't been talked about, so I think there's something we can contribute to this discussion. So back when we were just a podcast, I would just play the audio from the ad, but now that we're on a broadcast TV station, I've got a lot more limitations. So Gabby's just going to read the script from the video because that's the important part. That's where the message is, and then we'll start our commentary.
All right. Most things in life aren't simple, and that includes abortion. It's personal. It can be complicated, and for many people, it's not a black and white issue. So why do people try to label it like it is? Pro-choice? Pro-life? The truth is, these labels limit the conversation and simply don't reflect how people actually feel about abortion. A majority of Americans believe abortion should remain safe and legal. Many just don't use the words pro-choice. They don't necessarily identify as pro-life either. Truth is, they just don't want to be labeled. What they want is for a woman to have access to safe and legal abortion if and when she needs it. But when it comes to abortion, who decides? Her congressman, her governor, her president? Women don't turn to politicians for advice about mammograms, prenatal care, or cancer treatments, and they shouldn't. Politicians don't belong in a woman's personal medical decisions about her pregnancy. When it comes down to it, we just don't know a woman's specific situation. We're not in her shoes. Ultimately, decisions about whether to choose adoption, into pregnancy, or raise a child must be left to a woman, her family, and her faith, with the counsel of her doctor or healthcare provider. So the next time you talk about abortion, don't let the labels box you in. Have a different conversation. A conversation that doesn't divide you, but is based on mutual respect and empathy.
So the first thing that I noticed about this video when I watched it, besides the fact that it's really well done as far as, I mean, if you're into animation or whatever, I mean, Grace, who works on Life Report, she's got super high standards for things like this. And she was like, wow, this is really, really well done. The color scheme, the animation. I mean, this kind of animation takes hundreds and hundreds of hours. A lot of money went into this video. In fact, I'm surprised it doesn't have more. It's like 35,000 views as of this taping, which I would say for an international nonprofit, it seems almost like a flop. But what I noticed besides how good it looked was that this seems really familiar to that Planned Parenthood document that we talked about on a recent, I don't know how recent, it was a few months ago, whatever, the leaked Planned Parenthood document that talked about basically, you know, we're fine with people talking about this issue until they try to make it illegal. As soon as they try to take it away, then it was just kind of, you know, a very extreme libertarian, look, everyone should have the freedom to do whatever they want. This should be completely legal. I mean, it almost makes sense. They wrote this document, they were training their advocates to speak like this, and then they've made a video that is basically the exact same line of thinking.
Yes, it just kind of pretty much outlines their position as an organization.
Yeah, well, regardless of, because I went back and listened to that, I think it was in October, was the podcast that dealt with the leaked document. And honestly, I think that regardless of the conversation of whether it's relativistic or libertarian, you're going to get right back to the same question. Because either way, you have some worldview underpinnings. Right. You know, that libertarianism, if I understand it correctly, it doesn't call for total removal of government control unless it's an extreme view. But rather limited control. And that could lead to a whole conversation on something like natural rights, which Hadley Arkes, you know, is the big proponent of that, one of my heroes personally. And how timely. Lincoln's birthday was just yesterday. So talk about an advocate for natural rights. in his context. Anyway, either way, you get right back to the question that's at the center of the debate. And, LTI, we're all about it, and you guys bring it back to that all the time. And that is, what is the unborn? What is the moral status of the unborn? So when you bring up something like it's not really a black and white issue, I think Planned Parenthood here is capitalizing on perhaps the psychological complexity that can surround the abortion issue. And I don't think the pro-lifers deny that that's true. But morally, and that's the important distinction, morally it is a black and white issue because it does hinge on that question, which is why we teach people to bring it back to that question, to simplify the conversation, so to speak, and then you can go to things like science and philosophy and begin a real conversation about it.
I wonder if, so I was thinking about, okay, what do I think about this video? It's like, I think it'll be, convincing for people that are in the mushy middle, especially libertarian types that, generally feel like, okay, if we're for freedom and for small government. So I think this will be effective with convincing some people that are kind of in that camp. But then I was thinking, what is this going to do for the pro-choice advocate who's already with Planned Parenthood? And I wonder if this is going to backfire on them, because I think this is training them to use a certain kind of argument. So but I wonder what happens when that person ends up talking to a pro-life person who's thought about this issue before. Like I imagine in my head, the pro-choice person who has seen this video and is like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. This is the way that we ought to frame the abortion debate. I'm going to talk about it like this. And then then they come onto a college campus where Justice for All or a CBR or Students for Life or some campus group has set up something to get people to talk. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go talk to the pro-lifers and I'm going to use this argument. They frame it all about freedom and, pro-life, pro-choice, they're kind of the same and it doesn't matter and it's all about freedom and politicians not having a role or whatever. And then the pro-life person thoughtfully responds, I agree with all of that. If what? If the unborn are not human. And it's like they've set up to put all their eggs in this question-begging basket, and it sets them up to for it seems like a bit like they've put everything there, and now there's this kind of now we're going to actually have to discuss this issue, and I wonder if they're going to think this argument is a lot stronger than it actually is.
It also seems to me that one of the other effects that this video could have, and I think this might be a more intentional effect on the part of Planned Parenthood, is to normalize the issue of abortion, to make it seem like this is just another women's health topic, just like cancer, just like mammograms, and we would think it's so ridiculous if we had politicians deciding whether or not women could receive these kinds of procedures. Right. So of course we should think it's ridiculous in the issue of abortion. I think that's a deliberate effort on Planned Parenthood's part. And I think that's something that we need to try and prevent here in America. Eric Scheidler wrote an article for LifeSite News. He did a series on the accomplishments of the pro-life movement, and his accomplishment number 10 was that we have kept abortion on the front page. And he talked about his experience going to a campus in Belgium and how they did a anti-abortion protest and how the students were kind of bewildered that anybody would be against abortion. And so they weren't angry or upset or hurling insults at them, but it was kind of like, well, why would you be against this? And I think that seems to be part of the effort in this video is, sure, you might disagree, but that's not a topic for, politicians to talk about. I
think that's interesting. And when I was thinking about that statement, politicians don't belong in a woman's personal medical decisions about her pregnancy. I thought, well, I generally agree with that, but are there any exceptions? And I thought of an argument that my brother, Tim, put together, and we're calling it Tim's really dark story, because it's a really dark story. So say that to Warren, but I think this would be kind of the reductio ad absurdum. Are there any times where a politician should be thinking about the decision a woman would make, a medical decision about her pregnancy? And so the story goes like this, and now I've warned you, it's a very dark story. Imagine a married couple gets pregnant, they've been trying to get pregnant, and unlike maybe the stereotype, the father's totally in love with this baby. Like, he's super excited, he's going to the ultrasound appointments, they've named, everything's going great. And then the wife discovers that he's been cheating on her, and she's very, very upset. And so she decides, this is obviously not a super healthy marriage, she decides she wants to hurt her husband is in some vindictive way, like C has now been hurt, and so she decides the best way to hurt her husband is to hurt her baby, and so she finds a willing doctor to not kill but hurt her unborn child. And she goes back visit after visit, and you can come up with all the different things that a doctor could do to basically torture her unborn child. Here's our question. Is there anything she should not have the legal right to do with this baby? Because of the pro-choice, and anyone is going to say yes. There is at least something you shouldn't have the right to do to this baby. And if that's true, then that statement in the video that politicians don't belong in a woman's personal medical decisions about her pregnancy is no longer valid. That yes, there is at least some cases where you could do something that is so wrong, it's not just a matter of choosing how often you're going to go to the gynecologist. There's someone else at stake here. That goes back to the question begging part of this. What is the unborn? Does it have natural rights or not? I think, there are clear exceptions to that rule.
Yeah, we would, similar tactic that you're well familiar with is to trot out the toddler. So, but you're talking about during a pregnancy,
right.
Would this happen? So, But to bring it back to that question, trot out your toddler and ask, would this be possible in this situation too? So.
Let's talk about the labels thing. So there's this kind of thing going on, like besides this main argument that Planned Parenthood is making in the video, there's also this, and it's not super explicit, but this idea that we should kind of get away from the labels pro-life and pro-choice, and it seems to kind of be, they make some claims about how, a lot of people don't even like these labels. They don't identify with either of these labels. There's weaknesses to the labels. Before we talk about kind of the strategy, I just want us to talk about, can we agree that there are weaknesses to the labels pro-life and pro-choice?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's start with you, Megan. For you, when you think, because I know Gab and I have talked about this before, so I already know what he's going to say. When you think about the terms pro-life and pro-choice, like what is it that where you would agree that there are weaknesses to the terms?
Well, I think just like with any labels, the way that people will use them and understand them, labels are always going to, just on the face of it, drop a whole load of baggage on whoever is being labeled, depending on the context that they're in. Pro-life and pro-choice are prime examples. There are a million others. When you think about labels like liberal and conservative, the inherent, just the meanings of the words themselves are not what come to mind when you say those words. As a pro-lifer, I run into this all the time. When I say I do work in the pro-life field, people automatically assume things, and I will get looks like, oh, you're one of those.
Those angry anti-women.
Which we hope is changing as this generation is coming up and coming up with these sharp arguments and intelligent ways to talk about the position. Pro-choice too. I think that, which of course I guess we'll address this, why this decision at all to do away with the label? I always kind of thought that it was a very gracious thing to use that label because I want to advance the conversation, and it seemed to be the one that people preferred to be called when they hold to that position rather than pro-abortion or others like that. And I'm not really a proponent of using those unless I'm pointing out the specifics of the view. So I think that there are weaknesses that come with both. As far as that goes, with this, I'm wondering what is the problem at all? Either you are okay with anyone choosing this, even if it's not you, because I wonder if that's part of what's fueling this is there's a lot of people out there who would say, well, personally, I am pro-life, but legally or otherwise, I can't make a decision for someone else. Weaknesses, sure.
Some pro-life people, this is kind of bouncing off of what you were saying, Megan. There are some pro-life people that disagree with you, Megan, and say that you should never use the term pro-choice because they're just pro-aborts or pro-baby killing or whatever. And so, I've gotten flack on this show because we've used the term pro-choice versus pro-abortion or pro-abort or different, other even more caustic terms that can be picked. And for me, I just felt like, I agree. Yeah, there's problems with these terms. Like pro-life, what does that even mean? like for different people, like they've got this, everyone's got this own stereotype and kind of view of what these terms mean. And then, so I'm going to ask if someone's like, well, are you pro-life? Like if they ask it like really like, are you pro-life? Like with stank on it? Like, I'm just like, what do you mean by pro-life? Pro-life means hating women. Okay, well, that's not
good.
me. I don't know. But if pro-life means generally being against abortion and think it should be illegal, yeah, that describes me pretty well. And I can even get more specific if you want, because that's the thing, is there are thousands of views on abortion. So yeah, every label is going to be somewhat like, there's a lot of range within them. I'm more interested in finding out what the person I'm talking to actually believes and where they're actually coming from. I don't really care what we call them that much. I mean, the pro-choice thing, I mean, I've said, look, it's not about, her being pro-choice and I'm not pro-choice. I'm vigorously pro-choice about women choosing their spouse and their religion and their college and all that stuff. But some choices are wrong. Right, like torturing toddlers for fun. No one's pro-choice about that. No one's like, if you do it in the privacy of your own home. No. Some things are so bad that we should. So what's going on here? So I almost wonder, for the pro-life people that have dogged me in the past and for the last 4 or 5 years, now that Planned Parenthood doesn't want to use the word pro-choice anymore, are you fine with that term now? Are you going to use it now because, Planned Parenthood doesn't like it now, so I'm going to say pro-choice? But if so, what has changed about the term? It's still the same word, and I don't know.
I mean, like you probably would agree with me, I think that there are just some terms that once you use them, you've lost your audience altogether.
Right.
If they are firmly within the traditional pro-choice position and you throw something out there like pro-abortion, well, the point is to have the conversation, and the conversation is over right there. So for the sake of that's the reason. But when it comes to, I guess, labels in general, they, with the weaknesses that they have, at least they kind of give you a starting off point, because the rhetoric of this particular video is very good. It's very good rhetoric. It's very attractive.
Yep.
And I agree with a lot of what it's saying. No one likes to be just labeled.
Right.
They like to be understood.
Right.
Which is, I know that you guys are about that. That is something I'm very much about. If I'm going to sit down and talk with someone, I want to understand their view so that we can really talk about where to go from there. My mind might be changed. Their mind might be changed. Wonderful. But as attractive as this is, and as much as I think they're onto something, they take it a little bit too far. Because to try and do away with labels, you have no starting off point. In fact, meaning itself tends to be lost when you don't name things anymore. If you follow that to its logical conclusion, we're in big trouble. And you start looking at C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man. We're right back to the nature from whence we supposedly evolved. Gosh, I was reading a little biography on Helen Keller the other day to my daughter. And Helen Keller, who was deaf and blind, actually, she didn't begin to learn until she put her first label with the first thing. It happened to be water. And she was the first time that she was able to put the word water, where she signed it into Anne Sullivan's hand with the clear liquid that was spewing out of the pump. And she was so excited. And from then on, her learning began.
Right.
The world opened up to her. So it takes it a little too far to say we're just done with labels. We don't want to be labeled. And I'm sure, Josh, we're going to get right on into this. But either way, go ahead and do away with it. Call it pro-freedom, which of course begs the question, freedom for whom?
Right.
I haven't heard if that's officially the replacement yet. I don't know. But either way, what do you mean by that is going to be my first question.
Right.
What is your view?
Kind of where you made this point a little bit, I'm going to say something more, because this is so important, I think, for Christians to get, is this idea of, instead of us boxing people into this preconceived stereotype that we have, that we've heard, that we've gotten from our past experiences, or something our pastor has said, or something that we've seen on Facebook or a meme, is actually getting into dialogues with people one-on-one. What? I know. It's what if we got into and cared about the person? Like when we say listening to understand, listen to enter into their shoes. And so you're going to find out, yes, you're going to have to use labels during the discussion, obviously. Your main concern ought to be, what does this person in front of me actually think about this issue? And to find that out, you got to ask them a bunch of questions. And you should probably let them do most of the talking, at least for the first part of the conversation. Get to find out, I mean, if they ask you questions, answer them. I'm not saying dodge them, but actually care about them enough to get to know where they are instead of just putting them in the stereotype of you hate babies, and then I'm in the stereotype of I want women to go back to pre-voting. And like, let's get out of these boxes and care about each other. I agree with you about the labels. Like it's like Planned Parenthood has not come up with a replacement that they've said we're going to go with pro-freedom -to, whatever this long, I don't know what this would be. I know it seems uncomfortable for narrow pro-choice America.
It seems to me like that's the point. That's why they don't have a replacement, is because they want to get away from labels. And I thought what you were saying was really interesting, Megan, how if you don't have a label, you can't associate something with that label. And I think that's the point of the video. They don't want to be associated with any label. They want to be associated with healthcare, just like your hospitals, just like a clinic. They're just pro-women healthcare. That's what they're about. And it goes back to, I think, a very deliberate decision to try to get rid of politicized labels. They don't want this to have anything to do with politics at all.
So here's what happens if they succeed. It would accomplish several tasks at the same time. It would destigmatize abortion, but also I think it makes the word pro-life impotent. Let me reread a couple sentences from the video. Just notice what they do with the terms. So why do people try to label it like it is? The video says pro-choice, pro-life. The truth is these labels limit the conversation and simply don't reflect how people actually feel about abortion. A majority of Americans believe abortion should remain safe and legal. Many just don't use the word pro-choice. They don't necessarily identify as pro-life either. Truth is they just don't want to be labeled. What they want is for a woman to have access to a safe and legal abortion if and when she needs it. So they've basically taken almost everybody in the spectrum, or at least implied it, and said, look, whatever we call, we all agree that women should have safe abortion. It's like, well, I don't agree with, I don't.
Yeah.
What?
It assumes a lot. It assumes a lot.
It assumes a lot. There are actual objective differences and meaningful differences between people that think generally abortion should be illegal and people that generally think abortion should be legal, and that should be really obvious.
It's kind of, I wonder if it's aiming a little bit of trying to create that environment like Gabby referred to earlier. There are many countries in which abortion is a non-issue. It's just not talked about because it's just assumed to be part of the everyday. Again, worldview underpinnings are very interesting when it comes to that. But even here, we're going pro-life, pro-choice. We don't want to be labeled. What we want is this. There's no moral neutrality there. There is a firm position taken. It makes you seem like, okay, we're very neutral. This is what we want. So we're very up in the air. But here is our position, and yours too, by the way. So it does just assume a lot.
And what's the meaningful difference between where they are and what the word pro-choice has always meant for the last 40 years? I mean, I don't see this huge change of this is what it is. It's them literally trying to take out both labels, but their position hasn't changed.
No, it's still about personal decision, which it always has been.
It does make me wonder if there's been enough heat put on. What does it mean to be pro-choice, especially for those who would consider themselves personally pro-life and don't see the dissonance between their position and I still think it should be legal, which of course, to borrow from Scott directly, brings out the question, well, tell me, why do you personally oppose abortion? Right. Because then you can kind of connect the dots there.
You had something to say about the last lines of the video that talks about empathy. I wanted you to get a chance to get that in.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about this line is that it sounds exactly like something we would say. So next time you talk about abortion, don't let the labels box you in. Have a different conversation. A conversation that doesn't, this is where it ends. A conversation that doesn't divide you, but is based on mutual respect and empathy. Now, I think all three of us can agree that we need to have different kinds of conversation about abortion. And we shouldn't be divisive or argumentative in our conversations. And it should be based on mutual respect and empathy. But the way it's phrased, it's almost like a false dichotomy. It's like in order to have a conversation based on mutual respect and empathy, you can't, at the end of it, actually come down on different moral positions. You still just have to leave it up to the other person to make that moral decision. So you can talk about it, but you can't have a political view regarding the issue of abortion. And I think that's a false dichotomy. We can have civil, respectful public discourse about this issue based on mutual respect and empathy and still disagree very deeply about the issue.
And not only is it a dichotomy, that is a view. That is a position. And so, it brings back that conversation about how we talk about tolerance even now. By definition, tolerance requires there to be some kind of disagreement.
Exactly.
But this seems to say, well, you can be tolerant if you hold to this position, and if you don't, then I'll be intolerant of your position, which we've had that conversation many times. I'm sure you guys have, and I know I read into it quite a bit. When I work with students in classrooms, I teach them these types of apologetics tactics to talk about the pro-life position. And one of the things I warn them is that they can use these very irresponsibly if they're not careful. In the same way you're talking about having conversations based on empathy and on mutual respect, absolutely. Because these things can be used to beat people up. They can be used to embarrass other people. They can be used to make them look completely stupid at times, which shouldn't be the goal of a conversation. Right. As a matter of fact, I think that it falls squarely within the pro-life view to say that while we do argue for the rights of the unborn because they have an inherent human value that doesn't change based on any kind of arbitrary trait, so does the person in front of us. And we're going to extend that to them as well. If we don't, then there's an inconsistency in our view that should be pointed out.
I mean, I could go on a rant for half an hour on how pro-lifers should talk to pro-choice people, but you can just listen to the Life Report and that's pretty much what we do here. I like to try to sometimes end with a question for pro-choice and pro-life people to consider. So if you're pro-choice, and we've got pro-choice people listening to this show, I think partly because we use the term pro-choice. So whatever you identify with now, if you're on a different end of the spectrum from me, whatever, here's the question I want you to think about. Why isn't abortion a black or white issue? When the video starts by saying most things in life aren't simple, and that includes abortion, it's personal, it can be complicated, and for many people, it's not a black and white issue. Why is that? Why is abortion not like mammograms? Because it seems like if it was, then we wouldn't have all these people trying to make it illegal and keep it stigmatized and be talking about it 40 years later. It seems like there's something meaningfully different. If you're pro-life, I want you to consider this. If you're pro-life because you think the unborn is a valuable human being, but you are for legalized abortion for cases other than the life of the mother, how do you reconcile those two beliefs? How does that work? Because I know a lot of pro-life people want to say, well, I generally like unborn babies, but there's these certain emotional situations that I feel really bad about. And so, we can have abortion legal for this and this and that. How can you actually reconcile those beliefs or not? Check out our website, prolifepodcast.net, for more episodes. There's an episode archive. We've got 160 some odd episodes. It's now been 5 years, and I was asked to remind you, we could use your support if you like the show, if it has helped you. Consider clicking the donate button at the top because that'll help us keep the show going. Megan Almon is the presenter for Life Training Institute. You can check out her writing and their website at prolifetraining.com. Thanks so much for joining us today, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's our show. Have a great week.
You've been watching Life Report, pro-life talk, real world answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.